Flirting. Hello, everyone. It's Hailey. Welcome back. We're going to do an anxiety skills hour. So, I really wanted to take today just to talk a lot about different forms of anxiety skills. I think it's really important to feel equipped if you're experiencing anxiety. Feel like you can add some tools to your toolbox after today's hour. I'm a big fan of being interactive. So, hit me with lots of questions or personal examples that you feel comfortable sharing, because I really want to make these skills something that are really tangible for you guys to use. So, first, I'm just going to take a step back and just kind of talk a little bit of the bottom up versus top down approaches to like skills and counseling. And so, what we are going to talk about first is the difference between the bottom up approaches and the top down. So, what I mean by that is every different counseling modality or skills or things that we can use to manage our emotions can go into one of those two categories. So, a bottom up approach is something that really focuses on the body. And what I mean by that is our body sensations, things that we experience through our senses, like taste, touch, smell, hearing, all of those kinds of things. And that is the part of the brain that really allows us to feel connected to our emotions and our body. And so, those kinds of strategies, such as like EMDR or yoga or massage, those things are really regulatory from the body and the somatic experiences. But what I'm going to do today, though, is because some of those are hard to kind of do in this form of setting, is I'm going to focus on the top down approaches. So, the top down approaches are these types of approaches that really focus on the awareness. And what I mean by that is it allows you to really kind of focus on like the awareness of your thoughts. and really help you to shift the way that you're thinking and feeling from like the thought-based processes. And it's helping you shift away from unhelpful rumination towards encouraging curiosity. And so what I mean by that is ruminations when those thoughts are going around and around and around. That's what rumination is. And we want to shift it towards like helpful thoughts by steps that allow us to kind of get to a resolution of things. So I just wanted to highlight the difference between bottom up and top down approaches so that we can have an idea that we're going to focus more on the top down approaches. So the first set of skills that I want to go to is like the worry explanation question. So in this skill, the first step is always just to kind of take a moment and think, what's going on for me today? What am I worrying about? How's my anxiety maybe being triggered or experienced? And we can go, what is something that we're worried about? So let me try and think of an example. So maybe we could be worried about going on a trip and having a really great time. And so that could be a worry that we're having. And so we could write out that worry either through journaling or through using a worksheet, or we can just type it in our phone if we want. And we would say, okay, I'm worried about going on this trip. And so once we write that down, we want to start thinking about what will happen instead of what could happen. And that's a really important point because within anxiety, we're always jumping towards the future. We're always jumping towards what could happen, what might happen, instead of what we know with 100% certainty that will happen. So what we like to do is do a bit of cognitive questioning. And what I mean by cognitive questioning is that top-down approach where we really think about questions that we can use from our thoughts. So some things that we do know is that we want to ask, like, what are some clues that your worry will not come true? So if we're worried that our trip won't go well, it'll be a big disaster, we could go, well, I know I'm going on a trip with my friends and I really have a great relationship with my friends and they're going to look out for me. We're going to make some really good, fun, safe choices on our trip and we're going to be able to use those choices to make sure to have a good time. That is some clues we know. And we also know that where we're going on the trip is generally a good place, or maybe we've been there before. So we know that we've had a good experience in the past. And so we'd like to collect all the factual evidence, not our emotional repercussion of what we think could happen that's really dangerous, but some clues that our worry will not come true about factual evidence. And so the more that we question that worry, the more that we can start to see it differently. So for example, if your worry does not come true, what will probably happen instead? Well, if we're worried that the trip won't go well, and if it does not come true, that means we're going to have a great time on the trip, right? And so we start to see from the other side of things. And if your worry does come true, like say you have a really bad time on your trip, how will you handle it? Well, if things start going poorly on your trip, I'm sure you can take time to chat with your friends, being like, what can we do instead today? What would we like to do? How can we make it more of an enjoyable time? And I also ask, like, will you eventually be okay? Like 5 years from now, will it be okay if that trip didn't go perfectly? Maybe you'll be able to look back on that trip with laughter and be able to know, like, you're happy you still went, even if it wasn't the most perfect experience. And so after you go through answering and asking some of these questions, how has your worry changed? You might go, I'm still a little bit apprehensive about going, but now I can know with certainty that I can trust my own judgments. I can make good choices about going on the trip. I know that it's going to be a lot more enjoyable. And now we can not have that as a worry that happens for us. So I'd love to hear from everyone else if there's another word that they have, and maybe we can break down through these questionings as well. I'll try and see if I can think of a couple other examples because again, it just really focuses on the could happen versus what will happen. And that's so important. And I know sometimes when we're in that anxious state where we're feeling a lot of emotions, we might be having a lot of anxiety symptoms. It might be really hard in that moment to settle enough to answer those questions. So that's where maybe like the bottom up approach could start us off. It could be the deep breaths, really noticing into our body. And that's where we can really start to first calm down before we ask some of those questions. And a lot of the time it's hard to be aware of what we're worried about. Sometimes we can really be stuck in the symptomology and not have the awareness for what's really triggering us or bothering us. But if we're able to ask some hard facts and questions around our worries, we can really start to see things differently. So another form of cognitive restructuring and questioning we can do is the decatastrophizing. So catastrophizing means is when we think about the way that the worst case scenario, it's a catastrophe. Everything is on fire. Yeah. And I actually just see a question or a comment coming in. So Avita says like going to see family or in-laws. So what we can go is, well, we're worried about going to see family and in-laws. So first, maybe we could say, well, what specifically are we worried about that experience? Right? Is there something in particular? It's like, what about visiting family and in-laws is worrying for us? So we want to first narrow it down into some tangible fears or barriers or things that are bothering us to see what could really be bothering some. So for example, it could be worrying that our in-laws are going to be maybe a little judgmental. I think we've all been there. And maybe what could happen with that is we can be worried about them being judgmental. It's like, okay, well, how could I maybe have some clues that that won't come true? Well, maybe just because they have been judgmental in the past doesn't mean they're always going to be judgmental in the future. That could be a way to see that it won't come true. Or maybe there's a lot of activities that are going to be going on while you're visiting families and in-laws. And so maybe that could be a way to keep busy so there isn't that time for negative conversations to come up, for example. And if your worry does not come true, what will probably happen instead would be something like having a wonderful time with the in-laws and really getting some quality time, connection, some good laughter. And if your worry does come true, how will you handle it? Well, if someone is being judgmental or it's a little bit of uncomfortable conversations with family, you could just really try to be assertive and really communicate like how that might be hurtful for you or how you want to maybe change the conversation and how it's going. And eventually we'd be okay, sure. And maybe you'll maybe set some boundaries in the future with the family and the in-laws about how you want things to go from further on. And so as you go through those kinds of questions, you can gather more evidence and information about your fears and really start to see those things differently. So LM says, giving a presentation at work, worried about making a mistake or coworker saying something. Okay, so great. We're really worried about that presentation at work. What are some clues that your worry will not come true? Well, we could say, have you prepared for that presentation? Right? Do you feel like you know what you want to talk about? Or have you given good presentations in the past? Are there people there that you know are really kind and supportive and that could help you? And if your worry does not come true, what will probably happen instead, right? Is saying, well, most likely you have a wonderful presentation. Everyone will applaud and they'll really enjoy all the wonderful information that you're sharing. So that's more likely to be that outcome instead. And say you do mess up. We're all humans, right? That's where we can add a little bit of self-compassion that it's okay to make a mistake. And if they do say something, hopefully we can just hope that they're going to say something in a kind way and that they're maybe just trying to give you some really good feedback instead. So after you answer these questions, maybe you can see that fear differently, that it's okay to make mistakes, that you're most likely not to make mistakes with your work presentation, and you can really see it differently. And I really like that example because often when we have a big challenge in front of us or something that's really important to us, we automatically think of like the worst case scenario, and that is the catastrophizing. We think everything's going to be like blowing up in flames. It's going to be a bad time. It's going to be the worst case scenario. And that's what our anxiety does for us because it's trying to keep us safe and trying to help us not have that worst case scenario happen. Unfortunately, it brings us through all of the negative experiences of the anxiety symptoms instead of just trying to go into a productive way of, hey, these are some tangible things I could do to feel prepared. So for example, someone else, Amanda's asking here in the chat, I have had a lot of people in my life be diagnosed with cancer and now I'm having extreme health anxiety. Okay. Something like health anxiety is a really tricky one because yes, it is totally possible for us to be unwell and to have a disease or something like that happen. It's a tangible option in our lives because we're all going to be not in this world forever, right? So that's a really valid fear. But what we need to do is hit it with some hard facts. So we got to really be logical here. So we're worried about being ill or being sick or having cancer. Okay. We're worried about that. But what are some worries that it won't come true? Well, what we know from like health and science is that if we take good care of ourselves, we're more likely to be healthy. We can also go like, what preventative measures can I take to ensure that I'm more healthy? what information about my health do I currently know? Like, for example, I've had checkups and everything's going well. I don't have any bad symptoms. So those are some clues that your worry will not come true, right? Because it's like we see those things, we're experiencing them. And maybe we can also change that fear of being unwell into actually like motivating ourselves to be healthy and take care of ourselves and channel that energy towards something productive. But if we go to that next question of what will happen, it's like, if your worry does not come true, what will probably happen instead? It's like, well, if you're not sick, you're going to have a great time. You're going to feel well. Everything's going to be great. It's going to go forward. And if your worry does come true, well, I know this sounds really awful, but if you were to unfortunately be diagnosed with an illness, like, you would obviously do everything in your power to be well. Like, you would take care of yourself. Just because you have a diagnosis of something does not necessarily always mean that's the end of everything. Like, you can take a lot of time to do your best to feel well and take care of yourself and move forward. Like, that's what you would do if that fear did come true. And would you eventually be okay? Yeah, definitely. Like, if you take good care of yourself and you manage the health diagnosis appropriately, most likely you can move forward in your life in a healthy, helpful way. And after answering these questions, how has your worry changed? It's still a valid emotion to have a fear of health, but maybe the worry has changed now because you're like, wow, I can really notice that this isn't always a logical explanation of what could happen, right? And I see some other individuals commenting too that I have health anxiety too. So I think it's really important to really acknowledge what are the things that maybe trigger the health anxiety, such as like maybe a movie about someone being unwell or someone you know being unwell, and knowing that just because other people are unwell does not mean that you are unwell, or what, and asking yourself like what you need to feel healthy and balanced and well as well. So those are some really great questions, guys. I really appreciate that. And of course, I want to acknowledge like the top down approach of awareness of thoughts and awareness of like changing our thoughts towards more helpful outcomes is something that doesn't always resonate with everyone. But I wanted to bring this up because these are really tangible questions, is that tangible questions we can ask ourselves anywhere. Like, I always want to give you guys resources and skills that you can do anywhere, no matter what. You just got to be thinking, right? And so that's why I wanted to give these kinds of examples. But sometimes we do, again, need to take a few deep breaths, calm the body, validate our fears, and then go through some of these kinds of questionings to see the fear differently. Amanda's also saying that she finds social media to be a big trigger. Well, I would be really curious, Amanda, like, what about social media is triggering for you, or what is creating that fear and anxiety experience that you're having? And if you can narrow it down, you can really ask that question clearly. What is something that I'm worried about? What about social media is causing a lot of fear and anxiety for me? And once you can ask that question and answer it a little bit more clearly, then you can probably go through these other questions around like, what are some clues that your worry will not come true? Or if your worry does come true, what will probably happen instead? The whole point is, sometimes we just need to see things differently. And if we only see it in our one way, then we're only going to experience that challenge one way. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen like funny videos where it shows you how to like flip a grilled cheese differently. And you put the spatula like on top of the grilled cheese instead of under the grilled cheese. And then you flip the whole flat frying pan over. And now you're like, wow, I didn't know I could do that and not lose the cheese all over the frying pan, right? It's like, until we have other information or other perspectives, that's only when we'll start to see things differently and maybe experience our emotions differently. If we're only stuck in our one experience of what we're fearful of, that's the way that we're going to continue thinking about it forward. So that's why these cognitive questions are really helpful, is because it allows you to see things differently, that different perspective, a way of moving that fear from something that's illogical and irrational and really emotion driven to something more factual and logical. Wonderful. I see some other people joining in the chat. And again, I really appreciate that you guys think this exercise is helpful, because again, it's really about changing the perspective, seeing what we know factually and logically. And so I want to go to a similar exercise, the cognitive restructuring and the decatastrophizing, because it's, again, very similar questions, but it really focuses on like, how did your mind blow up that fear into more that it really is? So for example, I know that financials is a really challenging thing post-pandemic. Inflation, like financial fears and stuff, is a really valid fear that comes up for a lot of us. And so that could be an example of something that you're worried about. And the catastrophizing piece of that might be like, oh no, everything's more expensive. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And then we jump to, if I can't do it, I can't pay my rent or my mortgage. If I can't pay my rent or my mortgage, I'm going to have to move out and I'm going to end up living in some awful place, or I'm going to end up being homeless. And it just like jumps to like the worst possible outcome from that original strain and fear of financials. And so what we notice is like that jump, that's the catastrophizing. So what we want to do is decatastrophize. So we want to bring it back down into reality. And so we go, okay, I'm worried about financials. And it's like, well, how likely is it you're worried that will come true? Well, what are your other options? Like how much have you made like a budget? Have you looked and see if you can maybe move some money in different ways? Or what are some past experiences? Like, have you ever struggled with financials in the past? Yes. What did you do before that was helpful? And other experiences that could guide you, or other evidence to support that knowledge that you can work through that challenge or move things around. But maybe things might have to change in your life, but it does not mean that you necessarily have to become like to the worst possible outcome. And so if your worry does come true, what is the worst that could happen? And I don't know if you guys ever saw the show, This Is Us. And in the car, like one of the couples, what they did as a way to manage their relationship was they would call out, they would use a bad word to describe it, but they would call out this word and they would say like, then that in that moment when they're feeling a lot of anxiety and fear about something going wrong, they would list the possible worst catastrophizing options of the situation that we're facing. So I think in the show, the couple was talking about how their child wasn't really doing well in school. And so then one of the couple, he was like, I'm really worried she's going to drop out of school and it's going to be like, she's never going to make it anywhere in life and she's not going to feel well and happy and healthy and all of that. And that was like the worst possible outcome. But in reality, she just had like failed, I think like one test or something. And so what we do sometimes is we have to also acknowledge how illogical and how much we have catastrophized to be able to decatastrophize. We have to notice like the fear at the end versus also like what is actually most likely going to happen. And if your worry does not come true, what's most likely happen? Well, you're going to maybe have to miss out on some fun things with the financials. You're going to have to cut and slim and budget differently, right? But you're not going to necessarily be at that worst case scenario. And what I also like is doing a percentage. Sometimes like math and percentages are a really logical portion of our brain to use. And so if your worry comes true, what are the chances you'll be okay? In 1 week, in 1 month, 1 year, and you can assign a percentage to that to help you to really rationalize it. So in the chat here, I see Amit saying, I feel moments of anxiety when I have to express personal opinions, that I might not be what others are expecting, or that I might be perceived as inappropriate. I think that's a really valid fear because as humans, we really want to connect with one another and we really want to be close, and we don't want to feel ashamed, or we don't want to feel like we're different in an unhelpful or uncomfortable way. And so I think the number one thing is going like, what are you actually fearing in that moment? Like, are you fearing being rejected? Are you feeling your thoughts are rejected? Are you fearing like someone's saying something rude to you? So really narrowing it in would be step number one. And then what you would ask is like, okay, how likely is it that you will say something inappropriate? And if you do say something inappropriate, like what is your recourse? Like what could you do after that moment? Could you maybe take ownership of it, or maybe just stand by what you said because maybe it still has a lot of value? You never know, right? And so I think it's important to just like narrow in what you're feeling, narrowing what you're wanting to happen, and really challenge like that worst case scenario, because often that worst case scenario isn't going to happen. And it's really normal experience that we all go through as human beings to fear being challenged or spoken to in a negative way by others. Yeah, for sure. I see some other people really agreeing with Amit too, right? Again, human connection is vital. We want to be accepted. We don't want to feel ashamed. And so I think that's a really great one. I think also like some self-compassion pieces or some good inner dialogue would be a really great way to handle that as well. So I'm going to move into another exercise, and I would really love to hear people give some other examples. But the next exercise I have is speaking of financials, we're going to do a cost benefit analysis of behaviors and thoughts. So I would love for people to shoot out some examples of some anxious things that cause anxiety for them. Either it's like some thoughts or behaviors. And I want you to give me some examples here because I'd love to go down and really kind of apply my perspective to them for you. But with this example, what we want to do is we want to really pinpoint something that we want to change. Maybe it's a thought we're having or behavior we want to change. So again, this form of a coping skill is definitely, again, the top down approach. It's really becoming aware of our thoughts and our behaviors and really trying to shift it from an unhelpful way to a more helpful way. So I'm trying to think of something that would be really relatable for everyone. I thought my change would be I'm going to fail this test, or maybe it can be I'm not going to have. Okay, here's a really, I don't know if anyone's ever had this, but I'm not going to achieve like the life goals that everyone else is achieving. So that really big comparison idea. And so what you would do is you would write out like, I'm fearful I won't achieve my goals in life, or I'm fearful I'm far behind in life against everyone else. And so you would write down those thoughts, and then you would ask yourself, okay, what are the costs and benefits of that thought, right? And so, for example, a cost of that thought is you're comparing yourself in an unhelpful way. Then you would rate that out of 10 of the importance of that thought to you. How much do you resonate with that idea of that cost? How much strength and intensity does that thought have? So maybe that's a 5 out of 10, right? Because you recognize that when we compare outwardly in an unhelpful way, we generally have an unhelpful consequence or emotional experience. Another thought of that is we're buying into societal norms that aren't actually true for everyone, or are they actually even reasonable norms? Like, what are life goals? What are like the goals that are important to you? So we feel like, okay, we're buying into unhelpful thought patterns based on society. That could be like an 8, whatever, right? And then we could either write other costs down. So that type of thought expresses more anxiety, right? And so as you go through those different costs and write down the importance and the severity out of 10 for them, you would then total that up. And so then we'd also go, okay, what are the benefits to this thought? Well, maybe a part of you really does want to move forward. Maybe a part of you is like really about wanting to meet some life goals, right? And it's really important to you. So maybe that can be a motivation to have a little bit of strain and stress around that thought. So maybe that can get like a 3. Or are there any other benefits of that thought? Well, that thought does encourage like self-reflection. So maybe that could hold some benefit and importance as well. So maybe that's a 5. And so what you would do is you write down all of the different thoughts and benefits of that, cost and benefits of that thought, and you total them up. And I know this seems really funny because, you know, when you watch a show and you know how the ending is going to go, this is one of those moments because you already can tell that the costs are going to be outweighing the benefits of a negative, unhelpful, unkind thought. And when that happens, that can really be that rational, logical thinking that can really help us to see that experience differently. And then this is where we then restructure the thought. So after reviewing the costs and benefits of the current thought or behavior, we want to develop a more adaptive alternative. And so we try and think about that thought. It's like, okay, I would like to achieve my goals, but in a way that really works for me, in a way that is really compassionate and kind, and in a plan and a pace that is really just independent to my values and needs and wants in my life. And maybe that would be a more helpful thought to think. And it doesn't then produce like that fear of failure or fear of lack of success. And that would allow us to see things a lot more clear and in a more helpful way. So I would love to see if anyone else has some other examples or some other things that they could do for this cost benefit analysis. But I really love this one because the more that we target our thoughts and feelings head on, the more likely we're going to move for them differently. Because often with anxiety, we want to avoid the experience of anxiety and avoid our thoughts. But until we actually write them down and acknowledge them, we're going to start to see them differently. Sarah says that her thought says that when she's chilling and relaxing, she goes, why am I so lazy? I should be doing more right now. I shouldn't be relaxing. I love that one because our society is really built around like do, achieve, achieve, achieve. And so often when we relax, sometimes we experience like some self-critical or shameful thoughts or like not very kind thoughts. So we would write that one down. And we would say, for example, what are some costs of that thought? If anyone has any ideas of what costs that might have for Sarah, please feel free to share those. So we could say a cost of that thought is that we're being like hurtful. We're being kind of not kind. Like imagine if a friend said that to you. That would be yeah, really hurtful. And guilt, definitely. A lot of unhelpful guilt would come up, and maybe that would resonate. That guilt would be like a 10 out of 10 importance of that cost for you. Or I should be doing more right now. Well, when you speak to yourself with should, woulds, or coulds, that's really undefined, and it's kind of pushing you towards a direction that's undefined. And therefore, you're just going towards a direction that makes no sense. And so, what is more? Maybe you should be using more concrete, like I should be doing more. I should be doing this one task. That would be more helpful. And so then we could also think of some benefits. Well, maybe the benefit of that thought is like it's telling you in a really unhelpful way, though, that maybe there's other things you had to get done that were huge priorities that you've ignored. So maybe that has some importance. And so when we would add up those costs and benefits of that, we can see that it's a very unhelpful thought. It's a very hurtful thought. And so maybe we could reframe it as, I'm going to relax, and because I deserve to relax, I worked hard today and I'm going to relax for this many hours. But after this many hours of relaxing, I'm going to make sure to get this other thing done that's important to me. Or maybe next time what I'm going to do is make a list of things that I need to do and do like 2 things off that list and then take a break so that I'm honoring my limitations, but I'm also respecting the need that I do need to relax. So that would be another good one as well. Yeah, so I really love this one because this one definitely comes from like cognitive behavioral therapy, because it really forces you to go, what do you think affects how you feel and therefore what you do? And that connection is really valuable, that if you can have that awareness of what you think affects how you feel and what you do, you can really harness your emotions and your actions to really work for you instead of against you. So that would be another really wonderful one. And so if we move along to some other coping skills, we at the beginning I talked a little bit about like the top down versus bottom up approaches. So something like deep breathing would be really wonderful, because it allows us to calm our body. So it's so funny because like the word breathe like pops up everywhere for like feeling chill and zen and things. And it's so funny because we often like have a negative connotation or perception of breathing because it's kind of seems cheesy and whatnot. But really, like if we are emotionally flooded, we can't allow our amygdala to like calm down appropriately. And therefore it's overfiring, giving us a lot of flooded emotions. And we want to shift into our cognitive portion of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And so therefore that breathing is just really going to soothe the nervous system, and then it allows like the other ways of coping, the cognitive coping, the top-down approaches to really become more effective by soothing the body. That's why it's nice to find the combination of top-down and bottom-up approaches to regulation and anxiety skills. But again, it's always up to you guys to figure out like what you feel like resonates the most with you. So for the progressive muscle relaxation, it's another really wonderful skill that someone can do. And this is definitely more of the bottom up approach. And so progressive muscle relaxation is kind of what it sounds like. And so you progressively go through your body, tensing and releasing parts of your body so that you can notice that sensation of releasing. So even right now, if I squeeze my hand into a fist really, really tight, you can see that my muscles and my bones start to get strained a little because I'm squeezing so tight. And when I let go, that feeling of relaxation can be really nice to remember what that feels like and to loosen our body and whatnot. And so what we can do is we tense and relax the muscles throughout the body, and we can achieve that powerful feeling of relaxation. And so what we can do is either you can sit down or lean back, and you can allow yourself to go through your body, sometimes starting at the feet and moving your way to the calves and your thighs and your torso and your back and shoulders, arms, hands, face, and full body, allowing yourself to really, really squeeze and relax. So if you want, why don't we take a few minutes to see if we can go through this? So I'm just going to imagine you guys all following along with me. But it'd be really wonderful if you can try to squeeze your feet and curl your toes tightly into your feet and then release them. And just notice what it feels like when you tighten, and then you allow yourself to relax. It might be a really interesting sensation if you haven't really noticed. And we might also notice that as we go through maybe the calves of pointing or flexing your feet and letting them relax, or your thighs and squeezing your thighs together tightly and letting them relax, or the torso, sucking in your abdomen and then releasing the tension and letting it fall. Also the back and squeezing your shoulder blades together, releasing them. And then sometimes when we lift our shoulders up to our ears and let it go, we don't really realize like how much tension we were holding in our body until we actually relax, right? Because that's going to allow us to notice like where we're holding a lot of strain and stress. And the reason our body tenses up like that, it's trying to prepare for something dangerous. And so we tense up because we're ready to fight or flight. And so when we go and deliberately tense and relax, we're allowing ourselves to get our body into that calm state again. So we can move through our shoulders and arms, hands, face, and full body. This would be another great skill to add to your toolbox regarding like managing anxiety, because again, by calming the body, we can calm our mind and then go into some worry exploration questions or cognitive restructuring. So again, we kind of already talked a little bit about challenging irrational thoughts, but Socratic questioning. So there was this guy, Socrates, and he had this style of questioning where it's like asking like hypothetical, random kind of questions to kind of gain information. So we can use Socratic questioning as another way of having more information and seeing what's contributing to our anxiety. So is my thought based on facts or feeling? And it's kind of funny because when we're in an anxious state, our feelings seem to be facts, even though they're not. Like they'll feel that way, but they aren't actually truth. They're not actually like black or white. They're just an emotional thing that we construe because of what we're feeling. Or we could ask ourselves, like, how would my best friend see the situation? Like our best friends usually know us quite well. And they, again, have that alternate perspective that allows us to see and do things differently. Or how likely is it that my fear will come true? So again, the percentage, or really jumping into the future in a helpful way and pulling us back into the present in a more concrete way. What's most likely to happen, right? And if my fear comes true, will it still matter in a week, a month, or a year? And really that allows us to see things differently in that way as well. And the last one we also was really helpful is imagery, right? So our thoughts have the power to change how you feel. So if you think of something sad, it's likely that you'll start to feel sad because again, what we think affects how we feel and like what we actually do. I'm doing this because it's like a behavior, right? Moving our body or doing an action or inaction is a behavior. So if we also do the opposite, that's true. So when we think of something positive or calming, you feel relaxed. So like I love thinking about like being outside or on a beach or in the sunshine, like that also can create that imagery of that thought, that feeling can allow us to also feel, then emotionally feel more relaxed or calm or at ease. And then our behaviors will follow in that way. So I wonder, it'd be great if everyone could, even if you would like, feel free to take a moment to think of something that you find comfortable or comforting. And it could be like, again, that out nature or the beach. Maybe it's in your bedroom, something that you find really soothing and calming, a quiet mountaintop or a loud concert. Or for 5 to 10 minutes, if you could just use all of your senses to imagine the setting in great deal. So really noticing what you see in this place, what you can hear in this place, what you can maybe tangibly touch in this place, what you can smell. And how does your body really feel in this place? Like that would be some other great examples of like how we could really soak into that experience. And then it allows us to calm our mind and our body and therefore going away from anxiety as well. And so I really love that one too, because I think that we all deserve to have a place in our life that we feel calm, safe, and secure. And I think that we can all give ourselves that. And sometimes if we can't picture a place, it's okay to like use some imageries that we find online or a picture in a book or something that we really like, and really just imagine what it would be like into that place. And it can be a really grounding experience. So those are some really wonderful skills that we had. Another one that's just coming off the top of my head as well is I really love asking clients when they are getting fearful is, are we ruminating or are we problem solving? So I know this sounds like such a weird question because we can go, well, what is the difference between that? So rumination, again, is when we're going around and around and around in thoughts. So I'd love to hear if anyone has rumination that they're having recently. And when we go around and around, we're going in a circle. We're not going anywhere. And like the whole quote, like the more that you do something silly over and over again, the more it's insanity, right? The things that don't work. And so we're kind of creating these feelings of insanity because we're ruminating about something that we're fearing and we're not making any change. So if anyone has an idea or something that they're fearful of lately or something that's anxiety provoking, I'd love to hear from them, because what we want to do is shift from rumination into problem solving. And problem solving is really thinking about like, what are the steps I can take to move forward out of my anxiety, move away from my anxious experience towards actually solving it? Because sometimes we feel as though there's nothing that we can do with our fears and we feel really stuck. But I seem to notice that there generally is always at least one thing that we can do with the situation at hand to alleviate or decrease the intensity of the fear or the situation. So let me try and think of something. Let's see here. So earlier I was doing a podcast on relationship anxiety. And sometimes when we are fearful about our partner not meeting our needs, we might go around and around and around the fears of the relationship not being good enough or not meeting our needs. And so that kind of stuff, it goes, okay, well, we're just going around that thought of, I'm not feeling happy, I'm not feeling great in the relationship, even though my partner may be completely unaware of like how I'm feeling. And from their perception, everything's fine because, for example, I might be in a state of anxiety. So a problem step would be, it's like, okay, am I ruminating or am I problem solving? It's like, how do I take this fear and find like a problem focused or a solution focused way of moving forward? That might be like taking some time to communicate. That might change the different experience completely, because now we're moving forward towards working through the challenge instead of just around and around and around. Amit says, I want to be healthy or lose weight. So I don't eat for the whole day, then stuff my face at night and overeat. And then I feel guilty or eating for so much that I don't eat for the whole next day. So if you want to be healthy or lose weight, it sounds like you are choosing an action that may feel like problem solving, but it doesn't actually allow you to maybe feel healthy or lose weight. So again, maybe thinking critically about what you could do to allow more health in your life. And healthy actions can look different for everyone because everyone's different in their health and where they're at in their body and their lives. But maybe it's more of like, why don't I eat my meal and then have like a walk or something, balance, right? Not just one or the other instead of that black or white thinking. Because then if you don't eat all day, of course you're going to be hungry. Like, obviously then you're going to overeat and then it's an unhelpful cycle. So it's almost like its own rumination cycle within itself. But I would just recommend thinking about like a more helpful option that you could do towards those goals, right? Instead of just having fear of like that. But in that question though, I don't know if I necessarily hear fear. It's more of just like an unhelpful relationship with self that I'm reading in that kind of statement there. So excuse me. Yeah. And I think we've all been there because we have this like thought that if we don't eat for one day, we're going to be healthier and skinnier and whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily how that works. Yeah. So those are some of my favorite skills I thought I'd share with you guys. Feel free to let me know if you have any other questions or comments or concerns, but those are my main ones, is like the cognitive questioning, the reframing, the decatastrophizing, asking yourself, is it rumination or is it problem solving in the way that I'm thinking? The deep breathing, the muscle relaxation. And what's hard is that like here I am just preaching out some like coping skills, but I'm just going to hit you guys with some hard truths. Like these sorts of skills are helpful, but the more that you use them, the more helpful they are. And that's kind of unfortunately with everything in life, right? Like if you do something once, it's going to be fine, but the more that you do it and the more that you practice it, it's going to be a lot more helpful. And so that would be my biggest recommendation is it's not necessarily about doing lots of skills. It's maybe just picking a few skills and doing them well and doing them repetitively, because that's the thing about anxiety is that it's not going to change unless you tame it or find ways that you inherently just cope with it more effectively or understand your sense of self and sense of fears more effectively. So I did want to say that as well, because often we get so like, I don't know, myself as a therapist, I'm like kind of preachy. I'm like, do this, try this skill. But I'm like, it is super hard to do the skills. But if you can find it somewhere in your way to pick the ones that resonate with you and practice them more regularly, it's going to be a lot more effective. So that would be one of my main tips. All right. So those are some different skills we've tried. I don't really have any much other ones for today, but if you guys have any last minute questions, feel free to put them in. I'm happy to kind of give my opinion or suggestion on things. But it's really been wonderful hearing all of you guys sharing your personal experiences, because I think that's really great about our platform here, is that we're able to connect with everyone and hopefully have a less of an experience of feeling alone. And And I think that's sometimes just so important, because the more that we feel alone in our experience, the more that we feel like we're abnormal, when really anxiety is such a normal experience. It's because it's trying to protect us from unhelpful or hurtful things. And Sarah says that it's like what she's noticed. She's just identifying them as a skill. And sometimes it's hard to even realize if it is anxiety. Well, yeah, totally. Like sometimes it's like, is it anxiety or is this like a real fear? I think that there's always a sliver of truth in every fear that we have, but we have to recognize that that's a sliver. And 99% of the other things that's going on with that fear are probably a little bit irrational or unhelpful. And that's why it's important to like narrow down what we're actually fearful and what we can do to make it better. Um, and so, and someone was just asking, like, what if Amanda's asking, like, ways to stop the what ifs? Well, you've already hurt yourself by asking what if, because if you go down the what if, then you've already jumped into the future. And that's where anxiety lives, in the future. So, what if you go, this is what's happening right now? Right now, and we're always safe in the moment unless a bear is about to eat us, which is very rare. But if we go into the present moment and away from the what if, then we're not even jumping into an anxiety sphere. And Naveed's asking, how do I help a partner who's ruminating? I love that type of question. See, the thing about partners and relationships is that we are supposed to support one another, but we cannot fix others. And so what we need to do is go, maybe number one, hey, partner, how can I help you? How would you like me to help you when you're ruminating? Is there something I can do to support you that you feel comfortable with? And usually partners that are sharing out loud verbally they're ruminating are looking for validation, because they're in that state of feeling alone in the fears that they're having. And so sometimes it's important in that moment to not do anything besides validate and just hold space. And everyone's like, what is holding space? Holding space is just literally good eye contact. You're listening, you're putting good energy into the sphere with your partner and just allowing them to be who they are in those moments. But then maybe once the anxiety intensity has passed, you can follow up with the, what can I do? Or maybe you can go, hey, I thought of this idea. Are you ruminating or problem solving? Maybe that could help you in the future. Or just really giving them like the option for them to share with you how they want to be supported. But it's a really challenging place, because we feel so much care for our partners that we want to change everything and we want to fix it for them. But it's really more just about holding space, being supportive instead of being a fixer, because we've all been there where we're feeling a certain way and then someone hits you with a solution and it just feels very invalidating. And really, you probably just were sharing because you want to feel normal and you want to feel a sense of connection. So that would be some of my suggestions in that way. And I'm also just like, obviously I'm very biased, but like, I really do believe everyone deserves a chance, or should have a chance, to do their own inner development or inner growth. And like therapy, obviously I'm very biased, is wonderful. And that could be a really great way to explore the skills that are going to work for you and have that unbiased, non-judgmental spirit to help that as well. So those would be some of my ideas for you guys. Yeah, so hopefully some of these skills were helpful for everyone. They're ones that I like to use when I'm experiencing some anxiety, or they're ones I like to use in my clinical practice with clients who are experiencing anxiety. But again, it really does have to be that, which ones resonate with me, which ones am I willing to practice, which ones do I feel like are most helpful, because the feelings you're having are not factual descriptives of the experience. We need to focus on what we factually know. We need to put on our, I don't know if you guys ever watched the Nature Channel and they're describing like animals and like nature and the scenery. It's like, put on that voice of like describing it and the observing, and get into that sphere instead of just being wrapped up into the emotions of it all. So I really appreciate you guys, for everyone, for joining us today. I really appreciate taking the time to share these skills. I really love this platform and this opportunity to teach different ideas and things. And feel free to join us on any lives, ask questions. It's so important to create communities where we feel less alone. So I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.